Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another Season 7 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today, I'm going to be covering Kindred, the Eternal Hunters.
Never one
without the other.
So let's start off this Kindred guide by looking at their pros and their cons. So first up, Kindred's a very mobile champion that has some excellent jungle clear. If you use her range and her mobility properly, you're not going to take too much damage in the jungle, unless of course you're doing the Raptors or the Golems. Kindred then even has percent health damage, which makes her a great pick against tanky teams as well. She can of course go for a Blade of the Ruined King to do a lot of percent damage. Since their rework, they even have a scaling range now, so as long as they can pick up a bunch of marks, they're going to be very hard to get on top of because of their range. Finally, their ultimate can be pretty damn game-changing. If used properly, you can save yourself and your teammates over and over again, but be careful, don't save the enemies. For their first con, they're of course very squishy. You're basically an AD carry in the jungle, so if you do get invaded or if somebody gets on top of you, you're going to die very quickly. Now, although your ultimate can save your life, you can be pushed out of your own ultimate and therefore killed. Be very careful against things like Singed or a Hecarim that will take you out of your ultimate. Then finally, Kindred's pretty weak when behind. If you can stay even with the enemy jungler, however, and pick up some marks, you will be a pretty strong champion, but if you get none, you're not going to be that great. For your Masteries, you want to go 18 Ferocity and 12 Cunning, grabbing Fervor of Battle as your Keystone Mastery. Kindred's going to have a ton of attack speed, and she does also have an auto attack reset, so getting these stacks of Fervor of Battle is going to be insanely easy. Once you do have full stacks, you of course are going to have a lot of damage as well. For the rest of your Masteries, you want to focus on increasing your damage as much as possible, and also getting a little bit of sustain in both Ferocity and Cunning. For alternatives, you could go 12 Resolve instead of Cunning if you did want those Masteries instead, but definitely stick with Fervor of Battle. For your runes, you want to go for attack damage reds, armor yellows, magic resist blues, and attack speed quints. This of course is that very generic AD carry setup, and of course therefore works great on Kindred as well. That extra chunk of attack damage and attack speed will make the jungle clear just a little bit quicker, and of course increase your DPS in ganks. Then, just so you become a little bit more durable, you're going to have the armor and the magic resist. The armor in particular is very important because you are of course taking some hits from the jungle camps, and this will reduce it. If you were against a team with very limited magic damage, you could go for attack speed glyphs instead just to bump up your damage a little bit more, but usually I'll just stick with the magic resist. For your summoner spells, you want to stick with Flash and Smite. Smite is a requirement since you'll be jungling, and you need Smite to buy your jungler item, secure objectives like Dragon and Baron, and also keep yourself sustained through the jungle and increase your clear speed. Flash is then going to be the best option for your second slot because you are a very squishy champion and it will save your life multiple times throughout a single game if you do get caught in bad positions. You can also do all sorts of flashy plays like sitting in your Lamb's Respite and dueling somebody. When you're both low, you can flash away after it ends and then finish them off with range. Your passive ability is Mark of the Kindred, which can increase the damage of some of your abilities and also give you bonus range. Both Lamb and Wolf mark targets to hunt. Scoring a takedown on a marked target permanently empowers Kindred's abilities, as well as granting her between 75 and 250 based on Mark's bonus range. Lamb is then offered a selection of champions to take down, which is hidden in combat with an enemy champion. Once selected, there's an 8-second delay before the mark can be collected, and Lamb can change her target if the target hasn't died during a period of time. Target successfully hunted cannot be targeted again for some minutes. Starting at 2 minutes 30 seconds, Wolf periodically selects a monster camp within the enemy's jungle based on Lamb's current marks for 180 seconds, and selects another 150 seconds after killing a marked monster. So there is a lot to this passive, but what you need to know is you need to be moving around the enemy jungle as much as you can, collecting marks so you of course can empower your abilities and get increased range. Be very careful because the enemy jungle probably will be warded because they'll want to keep track of Kindred so you don't get a bunch of marks. They can of course also see your targets. As for the other part, you'll just want to make sure you mark targets before you actually go in for ganks. Keep in mind there is 8 seconds, so mark them before you get into the lane and then do your damage and hopefully kill them. Your Q ability is Dance of Arrows, and it gives you some really nice extra damage and is also great for the added mobility that it provides. When activated, Lamb dashes in the target direction, gaining 10% plus 5% per mark bonus attack speed for 4 seconds while firing up to 3 homing arrows on arrival against 3 nearest targets, dealing them physical damage. Lamb's current attack target at any proximity will be prioritized by one of the arrows. Casting Wolf's Frenzy or dashing while inside its area of effect will reduce Dance of Arrows cooldown, and Dance of Arrows resets Lamb's auto attack timer. So this is a fairly strong ability because it does have a 65% bonus AD ratio and of course scales with your marks as well and gives you some really nice attack speed. Since the cooldown is reduced when you use Wolf's Frenzy, you of course want to make sure you use that ability to reduce the cooldown on this after you use it. It's also got a 340 range, so try to use this ability to kite as much as possible if somebody's trying to get on top of you. Your W ability is Wolf's Frenzy, and this separates Wolf from Lamb and does a pretty significant amount of damage. When activated, Wolf dashes to the target location and claims the surrounding area as his territory for the next 8.5 seconds, separating from Lamb. Wolf attacks enemies within the area autonomously, prioritizing Lamb's attack target. Wolf's basic attacks deal magic damage and scale with 50% of Kindred's bonus attack speed. Against monsters, this deals 50% increased damage and cripples them for 50% for 2 seconds. Wolf's Frenzy ends immediately if she leaves the area. So this is a pretty nice ability because Wolf will be doing an absolute ton of damage when Kindred has a bunch of bonus attack speed. This of course also scales from your marks and deals targets current health damage, so it does a lot of damage even to tankier targets. To use this ability, you just want to activate it whenever you're going for a fight against an enemy champion because it will add a lot of damage. Your E ability is Mounting Dread, and this also does some pretty significant damage but also slows the enemy champions for 1 second. When activated, Lamb cripples the target unit, slowing them by 50% for 1 second. If Lamb manages to attack the target twice in the next 4 seconds of each other, her third attack in the next 4 seconds after instead directs Wolf to pounce on them, dealing bonus physical damage capped at 300 against monsters. Wolf's pounce will critically strike for 50% plus 0.5% bonus critical damage against targets below between 15 and 65% based on critical strike chance of their maximum health. So this is a pretty strong ability because first of all, it slows the enemy champions and it gives you some form of crowd control, although obviously not the best. It will either way make your ganks just a little bit more effective. This ability then also does targets missing health damage, so you want to use it when somebody's low so you can execute them if possible. Try to make sure as well that when you do use this ability, you're going to be able to attack a couple times with Lamb so you can proc that extra damage. Your ultimate ability is Lamb's Respite, and this allows you to create a zone where nobody can die inside of and then heals in the end. When activated, Lamb blesses the ground under herself for 4 seconds. While inside the area, all units, including champions, minions, and monsters, both allied and enemy, cannot be reduced below 10% of their maximum health. Units in the area who reach the threshold cannot be healed while within for the remaining duration. All units within the zone are healed immediately after the blessing ends. So this here is a really strong ability because you can stop a bunch of people from dying for 4 seconds. Unfortunately, it will also do the same for the enemies. Therefore, you're going to have to use this very carefully, and usually I'll just use it on my own backline. Be very careful, however, because as I said, you can of course save enemies with this ability. Make sure you're using it properly. Of course, also a caution, if you are facing something like a Singed or a Hecarim or something that can push you out of the area, make sure you're in the middle. For your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. You'll then want to max your Q ability first for its high damage and mobility. After that ability, you want to move on to your W, Wolf's Frenzy. Since you're getting a lot of attack speed in your build, this ability is going to be doing a lot of damage whenever you use it. Now that of course means you want to save your E ability for last. It still is a pretty damn solid ability, however, just not as good as your W and your Q. Since it is a slowing ability, you will of course want to take a point in it early on at level 3 so you can actually slow the enemy champions so you can do your damage. Maxing your E ability over your W is also viable, but I definitely prefer going W second. For my jungle route, I usually like to start at my blue buff and then do Gromp, followed by Wolves. Once I've cleared that side of the jungle, I like to head to whichever Scuttle Crab is marked and get my first mark of the Kindred. After I've got my first mark, I'll head to my red buff and finish the rest of my jungle afterwards, and then probably back. Against a good jungler, you'll probably meet them at the Scuttle Crab, so try and save your smite, and if possible, win that smite battle. Against really good early game junglers, be very careful around the Scuttle Crab because they're going to be looking to kill you there, since of course you have to go there to get your mark. When you're going in for a gank, you want to make sure you mark your intended target beforehand. It takes 8 seconds to actually go onto the target, so make sure you use it before you go into the lane. Now Kindred, however, doesn't have any hard crowd control, so you want to focus on ganking lanes that are either very pushed or that have crowd controls. Of course, when you do have your red buff, your ganks are going to be a lot stronger as well, so make sure you're ganking with your red. Now Kindred may not be a champion that's able to hold people in place for a very long time like other champions, but they do bring a lot of damage to the enemy team, and they can bring them down really quickly. When teamfighting, remember that you're an AD carry, and therefore you should be in the backline damaging the targets nearest to you. Stay as safe as possible, hit a carry in the front line instead of a tank if it is possible as well, and try your best to kite away from the enemy team if they try to get onto you. Make sure that if an assassin or a high damage carry is trying to get on top of you, that you slow them with your Mounting Dread, and then use your Q to jump backwards. In very bad situations where the enemy gets onto your backline and starts dealing damage, try your best to save your allies with your Lamb's Respite. Be very careful with this ultimate, however, because you can save your enemies as well. Do not save the enemies. Now let's look at some of your hard matchups, and first up is Pantheon. Pantheon is a champion that in the early and the mid game can easily bully and kill AD carries. He has an absolute ton of damage, and his passive shield is also great against you since it will block a bunch of your damage. It also gets refreshed with his W that also allows him to keep on top of you. You do have some more mobility than him unless he has his ultimate, so try to outroam him and don't fight him 1v1. Next up would be Rammus, who's pretty much the bane of any AD carry. He's got a ton of tankiness early on, and as long as he rushes a Thornmail, your chances of 1v1ing him are pretty much slim to none. He's got very good counter ganks as well, so try to keep track of where he is on the map and don't gank if he's nearby because he's going to roll up and taunt you. Next up would be Shyvana, who's a very tanky champion that also does some pretty solid damage. You'll have a lot of trouble trying to 1v1 her early on, so don't even try for it. She of course also has a really solid jungle clear speed, so getting any marks in her jungle is going to be a very hard thing for you. Finally, her ultimate can even push you out of your own ultimate, so try not to use it if you know she has Dragon Form available. And finally, for the last hard matchup, I've got Vi. She's going to be a pretty damn hard matchup because she's pretty tanky, yet she does a lot of damage at the same time, and she can insta-give you with her ultimate. Then of course there's the fact that her Q ability is a knockback, so if you're in the edge of your ultimate, it will knock you out and probably kill you. Try not to 1v1 her too often, and make sure you're near the middle of your ultimate. Alright, with all that covered, let's look at the item build. It starts with a Hunter's Machete, Refillable Potion, and a Warding Totem. For your core build, we have a Skirmisher Saber enchanted with Warrior, a Static Shiv, and Infinity Edge. This will give you a ton of attack damage, some really nice crit chance, and increased crit damage. Both attack speed and critical strike work great with Kindred's kit, and this already gives you a bunch of it. For your boot options, you have Berserker Greaves to increase your DPS, Ninja Tabbies against high AD teams, and Merc Treads against high AP and CC heavy teams. Since Kindred works so great with attack speed and crit, the first two items in the item pool are the Runaan's Hurricane and the Rapid Fire Cannon. Both of these are very solid items to get more attack speed and critical strike chance, but the Rapid Fire Cannon for that increased range is definitely my favorite. Either way, Runaan's Hurricane is still a fantastic item. For the next item, we have Blade of the Ruined King, and this is a fantastic pickup against a really tanky team that's going to have a lot of health. That damage on hit combined with all of Kindred's attack speed is going to make Kindred do a lot of damage against those tankier targets. If you're wanting to pick up some cooldown reduction and some armor shred, you could always get the Black Cleaver. This yet again is a really solid item against tankier teams, especially if your team is AD heavy and you know that the enemy is going to get a lot of armor. You'll of course have the attack speed to shred it quickly, and it's going to make Kindred do a lot of damage. Now if instead you're looking for flat armor penetration, you can get either the LDR or the Motor Reminder. I'll usually pick up the LDR here if I need a lot of armor penetration, but if you do need the Grievous Wounds as well for something like a Swain or a Soraka, then of course you gotta go for the Mortar Reminder. And finally, we of course have the Guardian Angel. This will give you a nice chunk of attack damage and armor, and of course the ability to come back to life if you do die when this item is off cooldown. For the example full build though, we take that core build and then add the Berserker Greaves, Rapid Fire Cannon, and an LDR. You'll do an insane amount of damage with this item build because you're going to have a lot of attack damage, a lot of attack speed and crit, and of course armor penetration as well. And that's everything I've got for Jungle Kindred. If you guys did enjoy the video, please make sure you like and subscribe, and also check out the video description below. I have a link to all my social medias, and I also have things like a Discord server, so there's some you should definitely check out. But other than that, thank you guys so much for checking out the video. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy, have a good day, and peace.